Today we are continuing our exploration of the Lightning Network by taking a look at Lightning Terminal, a set of tools from Lightning Labs that helps you run your Lightning node. Let's jump in. Welcome back to another video. My name is Ian Major. I'm an entrepreneur, Bitcoin pleb, and all-around raging capitalist, and I'm excited to do this video as a continuation of really the series that we've been doing around the Lightning Network. Depending on where you are on your learning journey as it relates to Lightning, I have a whole playlist that you may want to check out, including things like just total from scratch introduction, what is Lightning, how does it work. I've done a high-level video of the considerations you'd want to take into account when thinking about taking that next step and potentially running your own Lightning node. And then I've recently also done a full tutorial on ThunderHub, which is a kind of complete toolkit for managing channel liquidity, opening, closing channels, all that good stuff. And so do check some of those videos out if you think it would be useful. But today we're going to be looking at a different set of tools called Lightning Terminal. This is directly from Lightning Labs, who is behind the L&D implementation of the Lightning Network. So today we're going to be taking a look at some of the very interesting and powerful tools that are packed within Lightning Terminal. So you're not going to want to miss a thing. For those returning to the channel, welcome back, my friends. As always, it is a pleasure to have you. And for those new to the channel, I welcome you as well. I know there are about 80% of you watching right this moment that are not currently subscribed. And so if you like this type of content, I invite you to consider subscribing and join us in our merry growing gang in cyberspace. I cover all manner of Bitcoin related content, including a whole slew of tutorials around how to run a node, Lightning Network, how to acquire Bitcoin, secure Bitcoin, privacy best practices, mining, news, analysis. You want it, I cover it. That is how this works. But with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into the meat for today. All right, so just as a quick level set, today's video is really intended to be an overview of Lightning Terminal. I'm not going to go super in-depth into some of the different features. I will likely reserve that for future videos because there is a lot packed into this toolkit. And I will also note that, again, if you're brand new to Lightning, I would encourage you to check out some of those other videos I referenced earlier. I'm also not in today's video going to be covering, how to open channels and close channels. That's a pretty standard process across all these tools. It kind of looks pretty much the same. You go grab a pub key from the Lightning node that you want to connect to. And so I've done prior videos on all of that I will link in the description down below for you to reference. So just some context on what we plan to cover today, where you can get additional information depending on where you are in your learning journey, and then what we plan to cover in future videos. But before we actually jump into things, I just will do a quick rundown of some of the key kind of features within Terminal. So one would be their Loop kind of product. And so Loop helps manage liquidity. It helps you loop in, meaning moving Bitcoin from an on-chain address into Lightning, or looping out, which is essentially the reverse. You're moving sats off of Lightning back on chain. They've got their pool product, which I am particularly excited about. So this is a peer-to-peer non-custodial marketplace where buyers and sellers can come together around channel liquidity. If you're really serious about running like a super legit Lightning node, you could lease out some of your liquidity and earn a yield on that, because there are others on the kind of buy side who are looking for things like inbound liquidity. Again, as we've discussed in prior videos, that can be a big challenge for a new node operator on the network. I open a channel with someone, that means I now have outbound liquidity, meaning I can send sats out, but how do I get that inbound liquidity, meaning that I can route payments coming into me, right? Again, pretty cool how they've approached that with this marketplace concept of pool. And then there's also something called Faraday, which provides a host of kind of analytics for node operators on kind of the health of their node, things like how well connected it is, how good of a job it's doing in terms of routing and efficiency and all that good stuff. With all that, let's go ahead and jump into the actual action. All right, so for purposes of this walkthrough, I am going to be using Umbrel. I think Umbrel is so nice for a lot of folks who are maybe not super hardcore kind of command line users, right? Because it has this very handy app store. including Lightning Terminal. If you want to explore other ways to deploy this and connect to this, I will link the related GitHub and documentation in the notes below. And by the way, if you're new to Umbrel, I've done a whole video setup on all of that, how to set up your node from scratch. So check that out if you are sort of in information gathering mode at this point. But suffice it to say, you'd want to come over to the App Store, come down to the Lightning Node Management section, and here is Lightning Terminal. And so I have installed this already, but you would install it and then you get a default password that you can change, and I would recommend changing it. So once you open it up, this is what it will look like. And they actually have this very nice little tour. So I'm actually going to just take you guys through this browser-based interface for Loop, but there's also other stuff as we'll discuss. So would you like to take a tour? Yeah, we would. New to Loop. Lightning Loop can be used to transfer your Bitcoin balance between the Lightning Network and the on-chain Bitcoin network. You could technically do this through opening and closing channels, but the idea is, well, what if I want to avoid closing a channel but still replenish it with some liquidity? That's a situation in which Loop is very, very useful. As it says, this allows you to easily alter the balances of your channels without needing to open, close, and reopen them, which extends the lifetime of your channels. We'll hit next. So here are, these are fake statistics that it's taken me through in the tour, but we've got the balances of Lightning as well as on-chain. We've got a history for Loop, total inbound liquidity, total outbound liquidity, so pretty basic stats. And then it's going to give us a breakdown of our different channels. And so it'll show how many sats we can receive, how many sats we can send, broken out across your channels. Again, this is pretty standard kind of visualization that you'll see in a lot of these sort of suites of tools. It does have this helpful kind of coloration, where things may need attention if the channels are getting unbalanced. So that is nice. And we kind of already covered a lot of this. The routing fee charged by the peer to receive payments over the channel. That's useful to have all in one place. Uptime percent, right? So you do get some pretty helpful statistics. You get the alias right next to it and the total capacity of the channel. You can export your channels as a CSV file. Just a quick note in terms of backups, I would definitely recommend using so if you come to, assuming you're doing Umbrel, if you come to your Lightning section, you can go to download channel backup. I would definitely suggest doing this in addition to any sort of backup related pieces that you have in any of these specific apps that you do in Umbrel, just as kind of a best practice, but we'll keep going. So let's perform a loop. We click on the loop to start. So as it says, we want to use loop out in a situation where we want to transfer funds from Lightning back on chain. Again, you can do this through closing channels, but costs obviously in terms of on-chain fees. And furthermore, you may just not want to close a channel out, particularly if it's a useful peer, useful channel, etc. Loop out is very useful for that. By the way, how this works is through submarine swaps. So there's basically a submarine swap that happens between Lightning sats and on-chain sats. I won't go into the kind of gory math behind that, but interesting to say the least. And then use loop in when we want to transfer funds from on-chain into our Lightning channels. So this would be like a top-up. Imagine if you go through your outbound capacity at a pretty healthy clip, you may want to just replenish that capacity without having to, open new channels and all this and that. So loop in allows you to do just that. And so you will have noticed in that last view that it kind of by default sets to just sort of automatically pick channels that will allow the process to succeed. However, you can, of course, optionally select one or more channels if you want to swap the funds only for those specific channels. So let's imagine we're doing a loop out transaction. And so the next step is simply to determine how much we actually want to loop out. So how much liquidity do we want to move off of the Lightning Network? I hit the additional options, which is why this is showing up a little bit weird, but this is fine. So we'll go ahead and hit next. And then we're presented with fees. So, right, there are fees related to these services. There are some kind of similar services outside of Loop, and this 1.35% looks pretty reasonable. And this 550 would go from your Lightning Network balance to your on-chain balance within your node. And there we go. So the swap will now be displayed as being initiated. These do require on-chain transactions, given that as part of that submarine swap, there's one part Lightning Sats and there's one part, on-chain Bitcoin. You'll see that progress bar continue until you get the number of confirmations required, and then you are done once that turns green. All right, so now I am out of the tour. If you want to, you can always hit the question mark to take that tour again. There's a little, download CSV if you want to download the details of your channels, and you can see the couple of channels I have open here. If you want to take a look at how I set these up and did some rebalancing on them, you can take a look at the Thunder Hub tutorial that I did. So we sort of just went through a loop example, so I'm not going to kind of repeat what we just covered in the tour. And so we can see some of the different options here on the left. History is just going to show any kind of transactional history. We'll come back to pool in just a moment. Settings, you can see things like, if you want to change the unit from, Satoshis to Bitcoin, etc. Channel balance mode is useful. You can see a couple different ways you can optimize channel balance. So this comes in when some of the default settings within Loop. Do you want to optimize for receiving, sending, or routing, which would be a just more kind of balanced profile for your channels. Some other pieces here if you want to pull in information from alternative explorers. We have this beta of Lightning Node Connect. I'm not too familiar on this. I think this provides sort of access for you to connect to this node over untrusted web server, or basically from the web if you were out and about. So we won't cover really much of that. Now, I did mention Faraday just a moment ago. My understanding is that that is currently, it's bundled in here, but to kind of access some of the statistics, you would need to do some command line wizardry. So again, I might cover that in future videos, but I'll kind of post up here real quick just some of the statistics that you can get from this process. And so that includes, really basic things like how many confirmations, uptime ratio, but there's also some more detailed reports that could be helpful for accounting use cases, things like that. So in any case, with all that, let's jump into the next section. All right, so here we are with Lightning Pool. This thing is a beast, and so again, I'm going to do an entire video that goes specifically into this in the future because there's a lot of detail into how this actually works. But what I'll do in today's video is at least provide an overview of what this is and does. And so Lightning Pool, the concept is very, very interesting. It's essentially leasing Lightning channels. The first step in all of this is to open an account. So you would basically fund from your Lightning wallet balance. And this is important in order to avoid spoof orders, which is basically posting an order only to kind of try and trick the market in thinking that you're going to do something that you're actually not going to. So that's why this account kind of funding step is there. Don't worry, you can withdraw that from the account whenever you want. So that would be step one. And then you can see the bid and ask. So let's break this down. Bid is a situation in which you want to buy perhaps inbound liquidity. Like you want to pay someone to provide you with inbound liquidity. This is a very common challenge when first setting up on the Lightning Network. You open channels with others, and so you have outbound liquidity, but you don't have inbound liquidity. And so this is one way in which you can do that. So for example, let's just type in a few numbers. Let's say I want to acquire 100,000 sats in inbound liquidity. It's going to give me a suggested bid premium based on the market at that time. And we'll break that down in just a second. Let's just use the kind of suggested 5,000 sats bid premium. This is basically the service fee that you are going to be providing the peer on the other end who is going to be providing you with this inbound liquidity. You can see some additional options here. So what's very interesting is that there are different markets. So you can see that illustrated here. And you'll notice that all of these are multiples of 2016. And so there are 2016 blocks in every difficulty adjustment kind of window. That equates to roughly every 2 weeks. And this is just a nice standardized way to essentially almost build a yield curve in a way. But basically, these are different maturities of these loans, essentially, right? 2016 blocks, which corresponds to roughly 2 weeks, and so on and so on and so forth. So that is kind of the duration that you would want to have access to this channel. You can also set what's called a max batch fee rate. This is basically saying I am not willing to pay above this amount to be included in a batch. We will talk about that in just a second. And then this is basically saying from who would you want to potentially buy this? The default is what are called T1 nodes, but you can see that you can also toggle this to T0, which would be all nodes. You'll notice that mine is a T0 node. I've only got a small handful of channels opened, and I haven't really done too much to kind of build up my Lightning node. And so there are what are called health checks that Lightning Terminal does. And so it looks at things like, is your node online? Do you have a lot of channels? Do you have good routing capacity? What's the nature of the channels? Do you have good channel stability? What are the what's the kind of quality of your peers? I'm not super sure of like the exact parameters that would then make you a T1 node. But you basically have to be ranked on the boss score if you're familiar with that. But in any case, that's what this field is. And then you would basically see the breakdown of the different fees. And you'll see like the annual, basically the APR is quite high, right? So that peer on the other end who is hooking me up with this liquidity would be making a pretty solid yield on this activity. Now, of course, I could go and reduce the premium here, right, to something lower, and I would see that change accordingly in terms of the interest rate, essentially, that I'm paying loan, as it were. So I could, place that bid order, and I would see it then in my orders view. Now, what this graph is like attempting to show is the batched nature in which these orders are facilitated. And so you'll see this countdown. So this is a discrete 10-minute countdown. So every 10 minutes, this is not probabilistic like the 10-minute on average block time for on-chain Bitcoin. This is a discrete every 10 minutes. What happens is any orders that are able to be matched up. So my order, i.e. the bid, and then if there's an ask on the other side that matches up, then that will get included in the next batch. And so there's then what's called a batch execution transaction, which essentially settles these transactions on chain. Because keep in mind that this would entail the opening of Lightning channels, given that I've just essentially bought I've essentially just bought someone to open a channel with me to provide me with that inbound liquidity. So each of these sort of blocks here, if you will, are batches. And what we're seeing in the 250 here are the basis points, so 250 basis points. And then the percentage figure is essentially how much is that changing from batch to batch to batch to batch. It gives you at least an initial sense of where across some of these markets, where the kind of fees are. You would generally expect sort of what we've seen, right, where you have the longer maturity, the longer kind of lockup here corresponding to higher rates, higher interest rates. You would expect that. Versus if we go to the kind of shortest maturity, you can see it's pretty low. You can also change this to the table view in case that's a slightly easier way to look at this. But this is pretty cool. Like for each batch, you can literally go and look at the corresponding transaction that is settling on chain. And so that's pretty neat. Again, that's pretty much all I'll say. So we talked about bids. And then on the ask side, if you are a node operator that has spare capacity that you want to lease out and earn a yield on that capacity, you can do so here, which is very, very cool. Now, be advised that currently me as a T0 node, I may not get too many bites at my ask offer because the default on the bid side, as you guys saw, was T1. So in reality, what I would probably want to do is, work on my Lightning node a bit, open up more channels, add some more capacity, get some activity flowing through the node, such that I'd be able to, ultimately level up to that T1 status. That being said, you can still proceed even as a T0. You probably will just have, fewer folks on the other side, and that's partly to provide, you know, a good experience for folks on the bid side. So that's probably more than enough for today. And I think pool is a really important piece, even if you're not a node operator of any kind. It's still important for the network health as a whole, because it basically provides price signals for Lightning channel capacity, which is a very interesting concept. And so it's essentially going to help direct liquidity to parts of the network that need it most. So this is a very interesting kind of price discovery mechanism that helps make liquidity on the Lightning Network a lot more efficient. So it's still quite early days with all of this, but I think this is going to be a really important ingredient to making the Lightning Network and the liquidity therein as efficient as possible. You'll sometimes see these error messages in the top right. But there you go. So with all of that, let's go ahead now and conclude today's video. So there you have it, my friends. We covered today Lightning Terminal, which has a number of features, as we saw, including Loop as well as Pool. I think Pool is very, very interesting, and I think, as we saw, there is a big opportunity for serious node operators to make some pretty great yields on their sats. But I'm curious to hear, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about Lightning Terminal? Are there other tools you use that you really like? Let me know in the comments down below. I hope you found this valuable and useful. If you did, you already know what to do. Smash that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already, because again, I'm definitely going to be doing follow-up videos on these topics in the near future. But for now, we'll go ahead and leave this here. As a reminder, every sat counts, especially if you can make some extra yield on it through the Lightning Network. And until next time, I'll see you then.